Hello and welcome, and thanks for tuning in. You're watching Gravitas with me, Priyanka Sharma. Here's our show for tonight. The 23rd of February. What were you doing on this day last year? Where were you on this day last year? What were you looking forward to on this day last year? If you were in Russia or Ukraine, your fate was sealed. A war was coming. Battle lines were drawn. Countless lives were on the line. Russia was all set to invade Ukraine. Vladimir Putin would go on to call it a special military operation. Shock and outrage would be seen across the world as different corners woke up to news of destruction. Kyiv was under siege, and President Zelensky would go on to record his first video of many. A year later, here we are, one day away from the anniversary of a war which shows no signs of ending. The world is divided into camps, those who are with Russia and those who are with Ukraine, but there are still some who are neutral, who say that dialogue is the only way out. But a year later, a bigger fear looms. The N-word is back. Nuclear. Nuclear threats are making headlines. They're being spoken of as if it's no big deal. So tonight on Gravitas, I'll tell you why leaders are using the N-word ever so often. Are nukes the new normal? Also on the show tonight, as we count down to the anniversary of the war in Ukraine, we introduce you to a new emerging alliance between China and Russia. We'll show you a map to give you a sense of the geographical territory that this alliance covers. If China and Russia join hands, what does it mean for the world? A life-saving drug has made headlines in India, not for saving a life, but for its price tag. It costs more than $2 million. So tonight, I ask all of you, should a life-saving drug be so costly? Can you put such a hefty price tag on saving a child's life? And speaking of children, why are young couples saying no to kids? A new no kids movement is gaining ground. Couples are not sad that they are childless. They are ecstatic that they are in fact child-free by choice. Tonight, I'll introduce you to the loud and proud child-free couples, all coming up on the show tonight. It is the 23rd of February. Last year on this very date, we asked you a question: will a war break out in Ukraine? We all know how that went. So on the 23rd of February this year, we have another question for all of you. Will the war in Ukraine take a nuclear turn? More simply, will nuclear weapons be used, making this the first nuclear war in history with consequences that could lead to a dreaded Armageddon? Let's hope the answer to this question is a no. That no one will be mad enough as to provoke a nuclear war. But from where I'm sitting, the unthinkable has now become thinkable. And I will tell you why. Yesterday, the Russian President Vladimir Putin was addressing a rally in Moscow. He time and again used the dreaded word, the nuclear word. Listen in.
As before, we will pay increased attention to strengthening the nuclear triad. We will continue mass production of air-based hypersonic Kinzhal systems and will start mass supplies of sea-based Zircon hypersonic missiles. We will continue to inundate our forces with advanced technology. Our soldiers are now heroically fighting the neo-Nazism that has taken root in Ukraine.
Putin also said that for the very first time, Russia would be deploying the Sarmat intercontinental ballistic missile system. This weapon system can carry multiple nuclear warheads. But where will they be deployed? Could it be the Western Front? Another question. Why would you talk about nuclear weapons and nuclear warheads in the lead up to the anniversary of the Ukraine war? Let me make one thing clear. In no way am I accusing Putin of solely provoking a nuclear war. I wouldn't do that. Because if there is one thing we've learnt, it is that there is no one villain in this war. And if it takes two hands to clap, it also takes two hands to fight. And the Ukraine war is no exception. For the last 1 year, numerous nuclear references have been made by both sides. In October 2022, US President Joe Biden was attending a Democratic Party fundraiser. It was there that he said that the world faces its biggest risk of an Armageddon. What's that? It's a biblical reference to the last battle between good and evil. Basically, it means the end. Biden's remarks followed a no-holds-barred statement by Vladimir Putin. This one. When the territorial integrity of our country is threatened, to protect Russia and our people, we will certainly use all the means at our disposal. This is not a bluff. Biden agreed about the bluffing bit. He said that he knows Putin fairly well and that the Russian president was quote-unquote not joking when he talks about the potential use of tactical nuclear weapons. Tell me one thing. Why can't leaders leave out nukes from their generous warmongering? Why are nukes becoming the new normal? Biden had two options. He could have underplayed Putin's statement or hype it up. And he cleverly picked the latter, and I will tell you why. Because fear, my friend, is also an effective weapon in war and politics. Words like nuclear and nukes also get you votes, and they win elections for you. Remember, Biden's Democratic Party went on to do fairly well in the midterms that were held just a month after the US president made the Armageddon remarks. And back in Russia, Putin continued with his nuclear talk. In fact, earlier this week, Putin suspended the new START deal, START being the Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty. It is a nuclear arms treaty which Russia has with the United States. We told you all about it a couple of days ago on the show. Again, Biden could have chosen to not address this, but as expected, he did, calling Putin's move, quote-unquote, a big mistake. You see, here's what leaders do not realize. Nuclear charge talks may be good for rallies, but outside that stadium, they cannot lead to anything good, be it in Ukraine, Cuba, or Japan. A war in itself is bad enough, and when it goes nuclear, the war could be the end of everything. And by everything, I mean everything. Currently, Russia is sitting on the world's largest nuclear arsenal. It has some 6,000 nuclear weapons. This is according to ICAN, or the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons. Russia's nuclear weapons range from about 10 to 100 kilotons. The United States has upwards of 5,400 nuclear warheads. And just to give you a point of reference here, the bomb which was dropped on Hiroshima was the size of one of the smallest weapons that Russia has. Ukraine's Western friends, the United Kingdom, the United States, are nuclear armed as well. So if they all continue to provoke each other, it may just be a matter of time before one lights the fire and the other fuels it. What happens then? We may not even be around to report it. So is the direction the Ukraine war is headed in, is it this? On the eve of its first anniversary, are we talking about the war taking a nuclear turn? Let's once again hope that this time the answer is not a yes. The war in Ukraine may or may not go nuclear, but one thing's certain, it could lead to the rise of a new Eurasia. A new continental coalition led by Russia and China. An alliance that may occupy almost 6% of the Earth's surface, more than 20% of the world's population and almost 22% of the global economy. The frontiers of this new alliance run from Belarus and Ukraine in Eastern Europe to the Indian border with Tibet in South Asia. It's been called an alliance of the 21st century, and it's being bolstered as I speak. Just look at some recent developments now. On Wednesday, China's top diplomat Wang Yi visited Moscow, a visit that came just 2 days before the anniversary of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And a week after the US expressed concerns that China is slowly getting involved in this war. Wang Yi's interactions have only added more fuel to these suspicions. Let's now take them one at a time. His first interaction was with Sergei Lavrov, the foreign minister of Russia. The two leaders were all smiles as they sat down for a big bilateral. They even referred to each other as quote-unquote dear friend. And what did these dear friends discuss? A host of things. Reports say the talks focused on maintaining their strategic resolve, building a multipolar world, practicing true multilateralism, opposing bullying actions in any form, and safeguarding their respective sovereignty. What about the so-called peace plan? Remember, Wang Yi had constantly stressed that during his visit to Moscow, he will discuss ways to end the conflict and bring peace to Europe. A Reuters report now says that no such peace plan featured in the talks. In any case, we didn't expect it to. Wang Yi's next interaction was with the leader who started this war, Vladimir Putin. Now, if you followed Putin's interactions closely, you would know that Putin loves long tables. In most of his meetings, he's seen sitting at one end, with the other person sitting so far that it makes us wonder if anyone can even hear each other properly at these meetings. Well, this wasn't really the case this time around. The moment Putin saw Wang Yi, he extended his arms as if wanting to hug him. Next, they both sat within handshake distance, with an oval-shaped table in the middle. Now, if you try to study the optics of this meeting, the proximity was quite telling. It was perhaps used to indicate the growing closeness between Russia and China. What the two said next only reaffirmed this. I'll start with Putin. He said that relations between the two countries had reached new frontiers and that Russia-China cooperation had become integral to stabilizing the world. Watch this now.
Dear Wang Yi, dear friends and colleagues, we are very happy to see you in Russia. International relations today are more difficult. They have not improved after the collapse of the bipolar system, but on the contrary, they have become more sharp. In this regard, cooperation in the international arena between the People's Republic of China and the Russian Federation, as we have repeatedly underlined, plays an important role in stabilizing the international situation.
Putin's remarks were intriguing. Wang Yi made them even more interesting. He followed up by saying that the Russia-China partnership will not be overwhelmed by coercion or any sort of pressure from third parties. An indirect jab at the United States, which has warned China of unspecified consequences if it were to provide lethal support to Russia in this conflict. Take a look.
We would like to emphasize once again that a comprehensive strategic partnership between Russia and China has never been directed against a third party, and it's certainly not subject to interference and provocation by any third party. What's more, we will not be overwhelmed by coercion and pressure from any third party.
It doesn't end there. Wang Yi also held a third meeting. This one was with Nikolai Patrushev, the chief of Russia's security services. So why was this meeting necessary? What sort of security cooperation are the two countries eyeing? Is China looking to expand its role in the Ukraine conflict? The statements by Patrushev answered all these questions. He said that just like cornering Russia over Ukraine, the West is now trying to go after China over Taiwan, Xinjiang and Tibet. He declared that Russia will offer unwavering support to China on all three issues. Listen in.
In the situation when the collective Allied West is deploying a campaign aimed at double deterrence of Russia and China, further deepening of Russian-Chinese coordination and interaction in the international arena is becoming particularly important. In this given context, I would like to confirm our unwavering support for Beijing over the issues of Taiwan, Xinjiang, Tibet and Hong Kong, which are being used by the West to discredit China.
How do we perceive such remarks? If Russia is trying to say that it will help Beijing, should it invade Taiwan? Is that what Russia is implying? Or is it using the issue to get Beijing more involved in Ukraine? Right now, your guess is as good as mine. But all said and done, what this visit and all the statements highlighted mean is that Russia and China seem to have formed a rather informal alliance of convenience. An alliance aimed at countering the collective hegemony of the Western world and ensuring that Russia's offensive in Ukraine succeeds. I say this because since the war started, Beijing has provided diplomatic support to Russia, also an economic lifeline to counter Western sanctions. It has bought Russian oil, it has sold microchips to Moscow, and it might just be selling technology that has military uses. Reports in the American media say that Beijing is already supplying Russia with dual-use equipment, technology which may appear to be civilian, but can also be used to repair fighter jets. I repeat, these are the claims being made by America. They may or may not be true. But Wang Yi's visit to Moscow, his interaction with Russia's security chief, his statements on coercing by third parties, his promises on forging closer strategic ties, all of them do make one doubt China's intentions in this ongoing war. And now, speaking of intentions, here are two questions that are buzzing in the neighborhood. Is Afghanistan trying to starve the people of Pakistan, or is Pakistan trying to starve the people of Afghanistan? The reason behind these questions is the closure of an integral border crossing. The Torkham border, located along the Grand Trunk Road, it's the main border crossing between Afghanistan and Pakistan. It connects the Nangarhar province of Afghanistan with Pakistan's Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, and reports say that it's the busiest port of entry between the two countries. It serves as a major transporting, shipping and receiving site. Now let me tell you what's been happening for the last 5 days. This crossing has been shut down. Thousands of trucks are stuck, businesses are suffering losses, huge losses. And the people are becoming frustrated. So what has led to this? A clash between the Taliban and the Pakistani forces. It all unfolded on Sunday. The two sides exchanged fire, leaving one border guard injured. What was the trigger? According to the Taliban, the firing started after Pakistan violated its commitments. Reports say that Islamabad had promised the Afghan government that it will allow patients to cross the border. But it recently announced a ban on the travel of Afghan patients who were seeking treatment. This irked the Taliban and led to this firing. Now it's been over 5 days. The border remains shut. Reports say that the Taliban has now opened its side of the border, but Pakistan has not. So the border is still practically closed, and the people who use it daily are losing their patience. Especially local businessmen. They say that the closure of the border is making bilateral trade suffer. Listen in.
The border has been closed for the past 2 to 3 days because of the wrong policies of both governments. There is a huge loss to trade, again owing to bad policies from both sides. Around 20% of the trade that happens from here, import and export, is stranded. This is a loss for our country as well as for the transport system. They should make better decisions to encourage businesses and increase trade.
So what's being done to resolve the issue? Well, both sides are holding talks. On Wednesday, Pakistan's defense minister travelled all the way to Kabul. He met Mullah Abdul Ghani Baradar, Taliban's acting deputy prime minister. The two sides discussed tensions at this border and the many prevailing points of contention. Were they able to arrive at any kind of consensus? We're yet to find out. Interestingly, this wasn't the only issue that they discussed. There were also talks on terror and two outfits fueling it: the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, or the TTP, and the Islamic State in the Khorasan province, or the ISKP. For the last 1 year, these two outfits have carried out several deadly attacks both in Pakistan and Afghanistan. The TTP wants to topple the Pakistani state. The ISKP wants to topple the Taliban. So the two sides discuss ways to dismantle both outfits, and reports say that the Taliban even promised to strike TTP bases in Afghanistan. But will it live up to this promise? I say this because the TTP's attacks have risen in number only after August 2021. Now that's when the Taliban returned to Kabul, and before that, the TTP was a dormant organization. It was restricted to its hideouts in the hills. But ever since the Taliban's return, this terror outfit seems to have found a new lease of life. The multiple attacks on Pakistan's security forces are proof. Look at the numbers. In 2022, Pakistan witnessed a 51% rise in terror attacks, 5-1. There were at least 250 attacks this year, which killed more than 433 people and injured at least 719. Most of these attacks have been attributed to the TTP. That's not all. Last year, the TTP released a video. It showed the Tehreek's chief, Noor Wali Mehsood, visiting the northern zone, an undisclosed location in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. It showed him addressing scores of TTP supporters as a dozen armed men stood behind him. Do you know what he told the gathering? He said, the TTP is not a separate organization, but it is in fact a branch of the Afghan Taliban, which basically meant that the group is part of the new Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan. This is something it had long denied. For decades, the TTP had called itself a separate and distinct outfit, not a Taliban offshoot. Nobody believed them, so it decided to drop the pretense altogether. Take a look.
تحریک طالبان پاکستان دا د امارت اسلامی یو شاخ دی دغه چتره یو حسادو په خپل ملک په خپل خورک شه اسلامی نظام غشتین کې وتوسا نو دغه د پر اسباب لګیش تحریک طالبان پاکستان دا د امارت اسلامی یو شاخ دی دغه چتره یو حسادو په خپل ملک په خپل خورک شه اسلامی نظام غشتین کې وتوسا نو دغه د پر اسباب لګیش.
You heard that. The TTP is a branch of the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan. How then will the Taliban help Pakistan fight this terror group? Does Islamabad really expect the Taliban to take any action? Well, some leaders certainly do, like Bilawal Bhutto Zardari, Pakistan's full-time foreign minister and part-time elocution tutor. He says, Kabul's inaction on the TTP is due to mixed signals from Pakistan. Mixed signal. That's what he said. My question is, can there really be any mixed signals when it comes to terror? Here you have an outfit that is waging a war against your establishment, and you're giving mixed signals to the people who can control it? How does that even work? What on earth was Bilawal Bhutto trying to convey? We don't know. And we're quite certain neither does he. Let me now shift my focus to West Asia. Palestinians are on the brink of the third intifada. It means an uprising or a rebellion. The intifada may have already begun. Why am I saying that? Because the West Bank is on the boil again. An Israeli raid at a militant hideout left 3 militants dead. Israel says they carried out attacks against Israeli settlers in the West Bank. The Israeli raid angered the locals and they clashed with the Israeli raid party. 8 Palestinians were killed. More than 100 have been injured. What's even worse, the violence and anger is spreading. Take a look at this next detailed report.
Palestinians are infuriated and they seem to be united. After the Israeli raids, Palestinians have gone on a massive strike. In West Bank, Gaza and Jerusalem, they have shut their shops. They are venting their anger against Israel.
It is a day of mourning period and a strike. How would we be able to work or eat or drink? And our brothers in Nablus are being killed. We should stand in solidarity with them, with the people of Nablus. And there should be a general strike. And thank God the strike is in all the West Bank and Gaza.
Hamas, meanwhile, resorted to more violent means. The militant group fired rockets into Israel from Gaza. Israel retaliated with airstrikes. One thing is clear now, there is rising anger on both sides. Numbers never lie. For instance, support for a two-state solution in Israel and Palestine is at an all-time low. That's according to a survey this year. Yet another survey says that the third intifada is on the horizon. 61% of Palestinians believe so. So do 65% of Israeli Jews. Before going further, let's take a look at the history of intifadas. The first intifada, or the Palestinian uprising, began in 1987. It was triggered after an Israeli Defense Force or IDF truck hit a civilian car. 4 Palestinians were killed in that incident. Palestinians hit the streets with angry protests. The protests became an everyday affair. Israeli forces reacted with brute force. The protests and civil disobedience lasted for 5 years. More than 4,000 people, mostly Palestinians, were left dead. The second Intifada began in 2000. That was after Israeli opposition politician Ariel Sharon's controversial visit to the Al-Aqsa Mosque. The Jews call the site Temple Mount, but Al-Aqsa is considered the third holiest site in Islam. Palestinians took to the streets. They demonstrated angrily. They pelted stones at Israeli forces. Suicide bombings and targeted killings also took place. Again, Israel came down heavily. By the time the second Intifada ended in 2005, the death toll was close to 4,000. Even a minor provocation is enough to trigger an Intifada, and there have been more than one this year. The Palestinians are already furious because of ever more Israeli settlements. They are illegal under international law. But Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu doesn't care. He is expanding them. Not only that, he's emboldening Israel's far-right elements. In fact, his cabinet comprises several far-right ministers. Netanyahu has announced a slew of measures targeting Palestinians, like stripping families of militants of residence rights in Jerusalem, taking away their social security and healthcare benefits, distributing gun permits to Israelis, and bulldozing homes of Palestinian militants. And the Palestinians want an eye for an eye. They are targeting synagogues. They are attacking Israeli settlers. The militant-minded ones have stepped up attacks against Israeli forces. Make no mistake about it, another Intifada may be the final nail in the coffin of a two-state solution. It will be a polarizing global event for sure. It will be the last thing a conflict-ridden world needs. Unfortunately, neither Israel's Prime Minister nor the Palestinians seem to be in a mood to back down, at least for now.
How would you feel if your loved one was diagnosed with a life-threatening disease? What if your child was fighting to save her life? You might shudder at the very thought. You would do everything in your capacity to save them, wouldn't you? Sign up for the endless hospital visit, tackle long medical bills. But what if you didn't have the resources to do that? What then? This is the harsh reality of today's time. Medical services for certain disorders cost more than one's lifelong earnings. Even emptying your entire bank account might not hit the mark. Now, this might be hard for you to imagine if you come from a well-to-do family, but that is the case in many parts of the world. And for this particular couple, from India's financial capital, Mumbai, the worst fears came true. Their 16-month-old baby got diagnosed with spinal muscular atrophy, or SMA. His name is Nirvan. Look at the visuals on your screen now. Without a care in the world, he is just trying to crawl, but he cannot. He was 13 months old when his parents noticed something was off. Nirvan was not able to sit for more than 5 seconds. He was born with a spinal deformity. But the parents didn't expect what lay ahead, that their only child would test positive for something like SMA. Now let's see what this disease actually is. It is an inherited disease that affects nerves and muscles. It mostly affects infants and children, but can also develop in adults. It increasingly weakens the muscles to the point that the baby cannot stand or walk independently. Some of the major symptoms are tremors in the hands and fingers, weak arms or legs, joint problems, an unusually curved spine, weak breathing muscles, and difficulty even coughing. Nirvan's diagnosis was tough for his parents. But what seemed even tougher was shelling funds for his treatment. The baby needs a gene replacement therapy. It requires a single dose of Zolgensma. That's the name of the drug. It is manufactured by Switzerland-based pharma company Novartis. And guess how much it costs? Nothing can prepare you for it. A single dose, I repeat, a single dose of this drug costs 17.5 crore rupees. Meaning more than $2,114,000. I repeat, a drug worth more than $2 million. Can you imagine? Such a huge amount for a single dose of a critical life-saving drug, which brings me to my question. Why? Why is such a crucial drug so expensive? More importantly, should a life-saving drug be so costly? This baby's life is on the line. The promise of a bright future is on the line. The drug needs to be given before he turns 2. But from where could the parents fish out more than $2 million? One obvious answer is crowdfunding. The couple turned to fundraising platforms. They contacted several celebrities to spread the word. Now picture yourself in this prediction. Your kid is struggling for his life, and you have to publicize this horrible situation. Find contacts, scramble for money just to afford the basic medical treatment. I'm not exaggerating when I say that any parent would go to any lengths for their child. At the start of February, the couple had raised only 3 crore rupees, but they had a stroke of luck. Some generous anonymous donor contributed about 11 crore rupees, meaning $1.4 million, to this crowdfunding. The duo is grateful beyond words. But once again, could everyone be as lucky as them? I'm afraid not. And that's the tragedy. Thousands of such cases emerge. You might have watched such advertisements on your social media platform yourself. They are everywhere on YouTube, on news websites. This just gives you a rough estimate of how prevalent such cases are. So who is the culprit? Why is critical healthcare so expensive? Why do so many people scramble for money to save their loved ones? Drug companies like Novartis should answer that question. You see, when pharma companies are asked to justify the cost of their drugs, they conveniently point fingers at the cost of research. Their argument is they spend billions of dollars in research and development, R&D, in researching and developing these medicines, and that they need to cover that amount through sales of these very drugs that are costing $2 million for saving a life. In fact, corporations have a special category for such expensive medication. They are called blockbuster drugs. They generate more than $1 billion of revenue for its owner each year. And this particular drug, Zolgensma, which Nirvan needed, lies in this very category of blockbuster medication. Novartis generated around $1.37 billion through its sale in 2022. Until last year, it was the world's costliest drug, the costliest one. But here's a shocking fact. Despite its insane price, it isn't foolproof. 2 children from Russia and Kazakhstan died after being given this $1 million drug. So what does Novartis have to say for itself? Here's the thing. Pharmaceutical companies fail to realize that they are in a business of saving lives. It is people's lives that they are dealing with. Nobody expects them to be charitable and save people from dying. But can we really ignore the ethical question here? Zolgensma is one of the rare drugs that can actually treat spinal muscular atrophy. In a way, it has a monopoly on the market. So isn't it abusing its leverage through its sky-high prices? Now, thanks to the anonymous donor, Nirvan's life will hopefully be saved. But the harsh truth is that is everyone that fortunate? I'm afraid not. It's about time we hold money-making pharma companies, profiteering pharma companies accountable. Now let's shift our focus back to China, but before that I want to ask you something. Why do you study? In India, we have been told that education is a means to lead a good life, a means to go up the social ladder, and I'm sure the logic holds good for many across the world. But in Chinese schools, an incident has raised some other questions. A Chinese professor in the Anhui province has come under fire. His name is Shen Hongyu. And according to reports, his remarks are going viral for all the wrong reasons. According to some reports, this professor said that male students must get good grades so that they can secure admission at foreign universities. It gets worse. They should get admission to foreign universities so that they can hybridize with foreigners to produce better elites. While the viral video has now been deleted, his remarks have been called sexist, and now he has been suspended from his position. So what exactly did he say? This is what reports are claiming. I'm quoting, "Those with good grades should hybridize with foreigners and produce better elites." Shen's advice wasn't confined to foreign university aspirants alone. He also said, if he is admitted to Tsinghua and Peking University, he can choose from all the women from China at will. If he gets into a university abroad, he can choose from all the women of the world at will. But his reference to procreating with foreigners is what is riling up the Chinese. Some of his students didn't take these remarks lightly. They heckled their teacher there and then. In fact, Shen lost his job because a student recorded a portion of Chen's speech and posted it online. Shock and outrage followed. Now, reportedly, this professor was accused of glorifying the West. One student, who has been quoted in several media reports, says that this professor saw nothing but money. He has a servile attitude towards foreign things. What is the purpose of study? It is for the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation. This is what a student in China is saying. Now, since he was suspended, Shen has tendered an apology. He says some of his students may have misunderstood him. He says he wants his students to work towards changing their destiny. Now, whichever side of the story you believe, you can't deny something is wrong with Chinese education. On one hand, a professor could be peddling sexism to his students. But what about the student who interrupted him? And what about those who cheered him on? You see, these students seem to represent the ideology of the Chinese education system, a rigid ideology. A system where students are brainwashed with jingoism. A system where logic takes a backseat to unbridled hate for the West, specifically for America. Think about that. It's no secret we live in the age of consumerism. Nearly every useless thing is sold to us in the name of must-haves. Having trouble believing that? Tell me, how elaborate is your current skincare routine? When did it simply go from washing your face and moisturizing to 20 steps? This sunscreen, that lotion, this SPF, this lip balm. And don't forget the countless outfits that you own that change with trends, only to be abandoned in your closet after a month. Now, I'm not calling you out. Because is it really your fault? Isn't this what you see all around you? You open your social media account and you see some influencer promoting a certain product from a high-end brand. Must have, they say. You see it so often that you end up believing that you need it. Pay attention to my words here. I'm not talking about wants but needs. Yes, that's how dangerous the culture of influencers is. It had a brand value of $16.4 billion, but their uncontested dominance finally seems to have a rival. A new phenomenon of de-influencing is on the rise, and it has threatened to upend the marketing campaigns of many retailers and brands. So what is this new culture exactly, and why is it attracting eyeballs on TikTok? De-influencers are persuading viewers, you and me, about what not to buy. They tell you what does not work as spectacularly as claimed, or at all for that matter. So for a change, you won't be manipulated into buying something. Instead, you will see why it is a complete waste of your hard-earned money. And that is a reality check which most brands are not ready to face. The term first cropped up at the turn of the year. Social media creators have taken to criticizing their favorite brands and products. The use of the hashtag de-influencing has racked up more than 180 million views. And beauty and lifestyle markets are at the receiving end. You see, traditional influencers hype up a certain product, and de-influencers are there to challenge that hype. But why are they doing that? What is in it for them? In many ways, it is a fresh way for creators to build their credibility. They are taking it as a chance to be seen as honest and authentic, instead of a public figure who can promote anything for money. And let's not forget about charcoal toothpaste and gummies for every imaginable problem that's thrown at us. The anti-consumerism reaction comes at a time when some influencer brands have been struggling. For instance, Sephora ended its relationship with Selfless by Hiram. Item Beauty ditched Addison Rae. Many high-end brands and influencers have been criticized for their lavish lifestyles amid a global economic crisis. Beyond the economic challenges, minimalism is on a rise. Many younger users have challenged themselves not to buy anything new, clear out their spaces and get rid of anything they do not need. The circumstances seem ideal for a culture like de-influencing. But before you buy too much into it, there is another side. Another side to it that you must consider. Things on social media are manipulative. Most of the time, de-influencers definitely dismiss the hype around certain products, only to recommend a so-called better alternative. A creator with no skin in the game is free to critique whoever they want. Now, you might disagree with me, but the bitter pill to swallow is de-influencing could be just a different form of influencing. The idea of influence is tough to be destroyed. It's human nature. We see things, we want them, someone criticizes them, and our interest drops like a brick. De-influencing could very well be seen as a public cry for authenticity. The more controversial and counterintuitive you are online, the more engagement you get. And it's not about whether creators promote a brand or not anymore. It has come down to how involved their audience is and how many views and traction they can get online. So seeing how things are these days, the mass layoffs, a fear of recession, declining interest in consumerism, de-influencing is spreading like wildfire. Let's talk about another trend now. Children are our future. It's a popular song many of you may have heard. It's a staple on Hallmark cards. There's an entire industry built around motherhood, early years, parenting. But what happens when a society starts to celebrate a child-free life? What happens when a no-kids movement starts trending? What happens when the youngest generation decides it doesn't want kids? Before I introduce my final story of the night, let me be clear. I'm not here to tell you how to live your lives. Over the next few minutes, I'll show you a generational shift, a change in mindsets, in families, in choices. A new life script is being written by younger actors. And the new guard will be influencing our present and our future. Now, when I say a new guard, no surprises, I'm referring to millennials and Gen Z. A few weeks ago, I had told you about one and done. It was another trend among families of the present and future. Young parents were choosing to have only one child. They were saying one and they were done. The story continues. Open social media and you'll see people celebrating a life without kids. Be it Instagram, Facebook or TikTok, influencers, young professionals, couples, they're all showing us a new family dynamic. One where there is no toddler throwing a tantrum. One where there is no baby cooing in a bassinet. One where there is no how-to on parenting. Advocates of a child-free life are sprouting up everywhere. The no-kids movement is booming. And no, these couples are not calling themselves childless. They're in fact calling themselves child-free. The term free is being used to express a sense of freedom, a sense of liberation, the lack of accountability, at times responsibility. A few decades ago, we saw the rise of DINK couples. DINK refers to double income, no kids. Open social media and this trend is back. And how? I don't want to have kids because I want to spend my time and energy on achieving my own happiness. I want to backpack around the world. I don't want to carry a diaper bag. I'm 40, child-free and happy. These are not my words. These are views trending across social media. Have you seen memes of people wiping away tears because they're choosing not to have kids? Well, they're wiping away their tears with a rather curious item, money. It's a cruel joke. If you're a parent, you know why you don't have any of these spare notes lying around for a meme. Look at these stats now. According to the Pew Research Center, a growing share of adults in America don't expect to ever have children. In England and Wales, a YouGov study says that more than half of 35 to 44-year-olds don't plan on having kids. So why are people choosing a child-free or a childless life? What happened to those ideals of the perfect family, the dreams of raising a child, of investing in their future? The reasons are many. Let me start with the biggest one. Gen Z and millennials refuse to be part of the flip-flop group or the indecisive group. What do I mean by that? They want a life with no regrets. If they want to go kayaking, they don't want to have to squeeze that in between school pickups and ballet lessons. If they want to take a nap at 5 in the evening, a toddler tantrum should not come in the way of that. Another reason, the state of the world. From climate change to war, the youngest generation claims to be aware of what is impacting us. They don't want to bring kids into a world where ice caps are melting, extreme weather events are more frequent, pollution is hitting record levels. A world where a war is raging, a world where nuclear war threats are the new normal. And of course, the biggest reason is money. They say it takes a village to raise a child. I would say it also needs, or rather requires, a jackpot. Rising prices, ever-increasing tuition fees, changing norms of parenting. We're all constantly trying to keep up. The younger generation is choosing to spend their money on themselves, not on bibs and bassinets or summer camps. So if you have a double income and no kids, you will be sold a dream in no time, from lazy Sundays in beds to brunches, couples workouts, endless travel. But not all are happy with this no kids movement. This societal shift is seeing backlash too. Some are not too happy with these loud and proud child-free advocates. For instance, parents with kids find these dinks selfish. They refuse to see this choice as a choice. They refuse to read this new life script. And for those couples who are trying to conceive but are unable to do so, this choice of living a child-free life sounds almost like an insensitive one, because for them it's not a choice. So what happens when the youngest generation chooses to hop on a no-kids movement? We'll also feel the consequences. Remember, birth rates are declining in several countries, including Japan and China. In fact, in South Korea, the fertility rate, which was already the lowest in the world, has dropped again. A declining population means fewer people of working age to support a ballooning elderly population. But in the end, it all boils down to choice. Should you choose to have many kids? Should you choose to have one and be done? Or should you choose to be child-free? It's up to you. Yes, climate change will shape our future. Yes, costs of living are rising. Yes, parenting is a 24/7 job which you sign up for a lifetime. But as long as you are the one making the choice, you won't have any regrets. And on that note, it's time to wrap up Gravitas for tonight, leaving you as always with Gravitas Images. Thanks for watching.
$500 million in military aid. That doesn't include long-range weapons.
Yeah,
thank you. I'll be a bit.
Okay.
All right.
Keep going.
Where's